What's good, folks? Welcome to another episode of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. It is merry here on the show. It's a merry time of year. It's a merry time of the week because today is Draftsmas Eve. If you watch Friends, you know the reference. So all my folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, and mudbloods, I'm very happy to welcome you to this special Draftsmas Eve edition of Disguised Coverage. It is the final episode in this series, Building the Buffalo Bills Draft Board, Part 5, but it is the finale. 4 previous parts that were tremendous, a variety of guests, including a special edition last week with Dane Brugler of The Athletic. And I'm very happy to bring this series home with the draft a couple of days away, answer some final questions, put some final thoughts and scenarios together, and really, again, tie this up, put a nice bow on it 2 days out from the draft and set us off into the sunset. And to do that in this episode, I'm joined by one of my favorite people, and I know he loves when I say that, Mr. Bruce Nolan. Welcome back to the show. I also like having you here, I mean, in general, but you were on, I don't remember when, a couple months ago or a month ago or something, and we went through draft priorities, and priorities have shifted now a little bit. That's one of the topics we'll be tackling tonight, so I'm happy to have you here to bring things full circle for you and I with the conversation we had the last time you were here, to bring this thing full circle in this series, and in general, just to have you here. So welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Anthony, I have a bone to pick with you.
Oh, no.
You brought me on after Dane Brugler. Really? After Dane Brugler. The guy who nobody wants to follow up. Like, I'll put Bruce in that slot. It's fine. If this was baseball, I'd be batting the 5.
Oh, no. Well, technically, that was a special one-off edition. So technically, Kendall, we did a mock draft on Tuesday, but yeah, I mean, in this series, yeah, you're following Dane. I'm sorry.
But you're great. 6 now. I'm in the 6th spot. It's even worse.
You're bumping yourself. No, you're too harsh. I just said you're one of my favorite people, and you know I don't say that a lot.
Dude, it is great to be here. It is great to be here. It's great to be on Cover One. It's great to be talking draft. Let's do this thing. What do you think?
I think we should do this thing real quick as we get. Let's get a high level thought before we dive into the meat of it. As we sit here 2 days out, what's the main thing that's in your head regarding this Bills draft? Is it something position related? Is it player related? Is it philosophical in nature? As we sit again on Draftsmas Eve, where's your head at right now, high level, when it comes to the Buffalo Bills draft or this draft in general? First thing that comes to your mind.
You know, it's interesting. I would imagine that you would expect me to say that it's philosophical, and it is. It is philosophical. That's the thing that's on my mind. And here's the thing that's on my mind right now. I can very easily see multiple different futures on Thursday. You know, sometimes it's hard to imagine specific realities actually coming to pass, but I have a multiversal brain right now as it relates to the NFL draft, and specifically the first round. If you told me the Buffalo Bills were going to trade all the way up to 12 or 11 to take a wide receiver, I'd go, yeah, I can see that. Right? If you told me the Bills were going to stand pat and it was going to be Troy Franklin or Xavier Worthy or Xavier Legette at 28, I'd go, yeah, I can see that. If you told me they were going to trade down completely out of the first round for the first time ever in the Brandon Beane regime, they're going to trade down in the first round because, remember, McDermott was the one who did it the year of the Tre'Davious White pick. So Beane's going to trade down the first round for the first time ever, and the first pick that they make isn't even a wide receiver. I can see that too. In fact, it's actually what I predicted in my final predictive mock draft. If you told me that they were going to trade down and then double up on receiver, so you end up with Troy Franklin and Javon Baker, or Troy Franklin and Ladd McConkey, who very well could be there in the second round. I've heard some concerning things about his back. And so I can very easily predict that any of these things would happen, and I could feel very comfortable. So for me, it's very strange having this multiversal sort of outlook on this, where I have multiple realities going simultaneously, and I'm hoping that my brain can't jump between all of them at will. And that's kind of where I'm at. And I don't know if you feel that way. I don't know if anybody in the comments feels that way too, but that's where I'm at right now.
So it's super funny. And for those who don't know, every time I have a guest on the show, the questions that I ask or the things we go through, I give anchor points and an outline to kind of keep us on schedule. But I never know my guest's answer. They don't know mine. I like to keep things organic. If we agree on everything, cool. If we butt heads with everything, cool. I am in almost the exact similar mindset and state when it comes to like my high level thoughts with this draft. And one, it's just the multitude of possibilities, the verse of possibilities for you there. And which I find really exciting. Like they could do so many things. And to your point, like I could see them trading up if Romo Dunze falls. I could see them trading up and getting, I don't know, Jared Verse falls. They trade up and grab him. I could see them trading up a little bit into the 20s. I could see them trading back. I could see him standing pat and taking BPA or one of like 50 wide receivers. And then also tied within that is a point you mentioned, and this is a big one for me. There are very few things the Bills could do, especially in round one, that would like piss me off. Like there's so many good possibilities based on what the roster looks like, based on what their needs are, and based on how I think the board is going to fall. They would really have to go extremely sideways for me to be like, what the hell is that? Like there's so many fun options aside from just the wide receiver train that I know a lot of people are on. And I think that's what like where my head really is at. Like I see a multitude of possibilities like you. And also within that, a lot of them make me happy. Like not just as a Bills fan, but just as like person who appreciates football and good roster building. They have a lot of ways to do right things. Like there's a lot of ways that round one in this draft can go right for them and not a lot of ways where it's going to go wrong, again, especially in round one. And I'm glad you're in a similar state of mind philosophically. Of course, I knew that you would pick that option. I'm glad you did. You know, you're nothing if not reliable and consistent. And with that being said, enough high level thoughts. Bruce, should we jump right into it? Should we get into the meat of the show?
I think we should jump right into it and get into the meat of the show. Meat is a good thing, and we should all eat much, much more of it unless our cholesterol is bad.
That's fair. I like it. See, you're smart. I didn't even think of the cholesterol. Oh, 7 minutes in, and I feel like
cholesterol.
Yeah, it's like saying Rook, or I'm not even going to say his last name for cussing because I could just never nail it. I just
Rica Rojo.
That's just what I just keep calling him Rook, and it's so annoying too because like his running mate on the inside is just Tyler Davis, who has such a simple, straightforward name, and then it's come on, man, it's just like so deliciously ironic. But we will jump into it. So now, for those playing at home, actually, I'll hide that first one. Bruce and I have several specific topics that we are going to dive into on this show. 4, to be precise, a couple of them with some subsets and some sub points. We're going to go back and forth, have a nice organic discussion, final questions, evaluation pieces, finalizing this Buffalo Bills draft board. For those playing at home, joining us live, you know the drill. Every time we put up one of the labels, one of the banners, feel free to give your answers. Feel free to tell us how our answers are terrible or fantastic, whatever have you. If you are here live with us or watching later, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video if you have not already done so. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams and are extremely helpful to myself and the entire brand. So if you have not already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. Oh, actually, no, I forgot. Justin came in super early. Well, not super early, 4 minutes, and gave a super chat, which is awesome. Justin, you did the same thing last week. You were crushing it with super chats and also great comments and questions. So I appreciate the hell out of you for being here and being here early and for your monetary donation. And Bruce, Justin says, I'm team trade down, but Bean isn't. Funny, kind of like you mentioned. He says, do you think we use our second next year, not Minnesota's, to bridge that gap between 60 and 128? Bean would pass out if he had to wait for 67 players taken before being on the clock. I've talked about this a bunch on the show already. And Bruce, just to kind of want to get your thoughts really quick here, because this is something I mentioned. Like they go from 60 and then their next pick right now isn't until 128 because the Krabby Patty secret comp pick formula screwed the Bills out of a 3rd round pick. And we still don't know why. That's a huge amount of time. You mentioned it briefly. Are you a fan of the trade down, or do you think it has an opportunity to happen given the value that there exists on day 2? And to Justin's point, how big of a gap there would be between the 2nd and 3rd pick for the Bills early in round 4?
I am a fan of trading back from 28 because I do think that the way this class is structured based on the Buffalo Bills needs, I think you can find similar qualities of players. Brandon Beane mentioned himself. He does not have 28 first-round grades. And that's, just so you know, that's not a bluff. Nobody has 28 first-round grades. So it gets you thinking like, oh, well, he's bluffing. He actually has 32. Nobody has 32 first-round grades. Like teams don't have 32 first-round grades every single year. In fact, most of the time they have 18 or 16 or 17,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
Brandon Beane's sitting there hoping one of those people is going to fall because the quarterbacks are going to push people down. Some people drafting for need are going to push people down, things like
Yep.
that. So I'm not going to be upset if the
Mhm.
Buffalo Bills trade back and pick up a third. I think one of the things interesting to make sure that we draw a delineation here is the difference between draft capital and draft picks. So when you say the Bills have a lot of draft capital, that's not true. They actually don't. They have crappy draft capital. They have a lot of draft picks, but they're all at the very end.
They have a bunch of quantity and not a ton of quality.
Right. So, all right. I've mentioned before that Mitch Hedberg is my favorite stand-up comedian of all time. This has been a conversation point, I think. And Mitch Hedberg, one of his famous lines is that rice, he says, rice is good when you're hungry and you want a million of something, right?
Yep.
The Buffalo Bills have plain white rice. They have a lot of it, right? But that doesn't mean it's of high quality. It's just plain white rice, right? You got to do something. You know, it's like going to the gas station and get Slim Jims, two for 50 cents, right? Okay, you got multiples, but they're not high quality. So I think that the ability to be able to get more picks where the value is based on need, which for the Buffalo Bills in a historically deep wide receiver class, in a great offensive line class, could be on day 2. If you want to try and maximize and get as many top 100 picks as you can, then you might want to move back and then try and move up. Do a compression style draft philosophy. You move back and then you move up from there. But I'm not opposed to it. I will say Beane moving a second next year to get a third this year or a second this year feels, I don't think so. So we've seen this a couple times where people will actually move a future pick that is 1 round higher to get this. Famously, the Carolina Panthers, who actually, funny story, Brandon Beane referenced this in one of his press conferences.
Yes, he did.
He said we moved a future first for Everett Brown. Now, here's what happened in that pick. They didn't move up in that draft at all. They literally just said, we will give you a future first for this pick right here in the second round. And the other team was like, yes, please. And they took Everett Brown with that pick. They just manufactured a pick out of thin air by using a future first. Did not work out. We've seen this happen where people will move a future third for a current 4 or a future 2 for a current 3. I don't think Brandon Beane is going to do that. So for me, the only time you'd use the second next year is if you're moving up from 28 or from 60 to get up to like 35 or whatever it is, right? That's the only time you probably do that. I don't think you'd use it to get a third. I think you'd have to use that higher.
I'm in a similar boat. Like if they're using the second, I think the second next year is really interesting, and either using that and or feeling comfortable having 2 2s next year and maybe using that first next year and packaging that to try and move up for Romo Dunze or somebody who they really covet, in the teens, low teens, or maybe at the end of the single digits in round 1. But overall, I'm in a similar boat. I love, like, my favorite like mock scenarios are the ones where where the board falls the right way and the Bills are able to move from 28 to like 35 and then also get a pick in the late 80s or mid 90s. Like, I just really covet the prospects on day 2, so round 2 and round 3. So I'm in a similar boat. And that's a great question from Justin. He crushed it last week with super chats and then awesome thoughts. So wanted to highlight that. Also, just for your edification and knowledge, my favorite Mitch Hedberg line is him talking about, he was like looking at houses and it said like, oh, like this house had 4 bedrooms. And he was thinking like, isn't that up to like my discretion? And then he's like, hey, like, welcome to my 5th bedroom. It looks a lot like a kitchen.
We could do this entire show with just Mitch Hedberg stuff.
We really could.
We really could.
Oh man. Oh, that got me. All right.
So here's the plan. For the rest of the show, we're going to try and inject like a Mitch Hedberg line every every once in a while for the rest of the show, just to keep each other on the toes.
I think that's fair. I already got my next one in the holster. I just need to figure out when to use it. All right. Cool, playing at home. Like I said, if you like what we're saying, feel free to tell us in the chat. If you hate it, feel free to tell us in the chat. If you have thoughts of your own, that's awesome too. Feel free to put them in the chat. Much like Justin's comment earlier, super chats get priority. 1, because I respect the monetary donation. 2, the color attracts my eyes and pulls me away from my notes. I'm going to start coughing again. So Bruce, feel free to lead off. You are also the guest. So our first topic here is the top 3 players you hope fall to pick 28. It could be any position. It could be in any order. Bruce, feel free if you want to start with your third or your first, however you want to go. The floor is yours and the freedom is yours. Godspeed.
Go ahead and start coughing. I will cover you because this is disguise coverage. I won't even disguise it, actually. I'm just going to go ahead and openly cover you. Speaking of which, if you and I were the Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde of the Buffalo Bills content creation, we got to pick new tag team.
That's a good call.
We missed out on that opportunity. So
damn it.
We'll think about that as I talk about the top 3 players. I'm going to pick one from every position that I believe the Buffalo Bills would theoretically take.
Like it.
Number 1, I think Brian Thomas falling is a lot more opportunity now than it used to be because I think he's dealing with a torn labrum. And I think that there are going to be teams who go, oh, well, yeah, I don't really know. So I still think Brian Thomas is gone. But when I say hope, it means I hope the medicals push him because I think that would make it a little bit easier, right? Yeah. If he's there at 28, I think that makes the conversation a little bit easier. I don't think he will be, but this is a hope fall, and I do have a reasonable reason why he would, which is an injury. In exactly that same vein, Leitu Latu has the type of skill set that does not get out of the top 10. The only reason he's there is because people are scared about the neck. And they should be. They should be scared about the neck.
He was forced to medically retire at one point.
Right. It's one of those things where, Beans, swing for the fences, unless it's taking Leitu Latu at 28, in which case now we don't want to swing for the fences. So I have Brian Thomas Jr. and Leitu Latu for the exact same reason, except obviously Leitu Latu's injury is a lot more serious than Brian Thomas's. But both of those are opportunities for those players to fall because of medical. People like Leitu Latu don't show up at 28.
Yeah.
The only reason you get someone like there is because of a massive red flag. And in this case, it's the neck. The third one is Jackson Powers Johnson, which Sophia pointed out.
Good timing.
Jackson Powers Johnson has started to slide a little bit to the point where now people are wondering if maybe Frazier goes ahead of him. I do think Frazier is probably a more Billsy prospect.
Former wrestler, and he was great at it.
But Jackson Powers Johnson, I think, is the best interior offensive lineman in the class. I have him over Graham Barton, which a lot of people don't. So just wanted to throw that out there. And so for me, if he's there at 28, I'm interested. Those are the 3 positions that I think that could reasonably, you could draw yourself an argument. You could draw yourself a story. You could tell yourself a story that they got to 28 for a reason. And players like that don't typically make it to 28. Yeah. So you just you pull a Ravens. You just nod and say, thank you for this thing falling to me, and I will take it. Because the Baltimore Ravens have made an entire 20-year period about just having good players who fall for one particular reason. Usually it's injury related or something like that. And they just go, yeah, I'll scoop them up 15, 18, 60 picks later than they probably should have gone. And I'll just sit on them for a while. They did it with the offensive lineman from USC, whose name is escaping me last year. They picked him up.
Andrew Voorhees. I loved Andrew Voorhees.
Was a big Voorhees guy. They just picked him up and said, yeah, we'll sit on him for a year. Yep. And they did. And now they have, shockingly, they needed an offensive line. They have a guy that can just plug right in. If
they lost John Simpson, and it was like, oh, what do we do? Well, we just been sitting on Andrew Voorhees, and his leg is all good now, so we're okay.
Right. So if we want to do that, I'm down with it. So those are the 3 players that I quote unquote am hoping fall to the Buffalo Bills because I can see a path. I can tell myself a story as to why they would have gotten there.
Interesting. I like your reasoning, and the reasoning is important. And for me, I don't have a receiver in this group in my top 3 players I hope fall to 28. And that's related to our second point that we're going to go through. So I don't want to put any spoilers out there. I do have Latu as one. And that's just, again, to your point, I'm hoping he falls because I think he has the most realistic chance of the top 3 edges to fall. I don't think Dallas Turner is going to fall anywhere past the mid-teens, maybe late teens. Same thing with Verse if somebody values them differently. But I think if you want to get Turner or Verse, whichever one goes after the other, you're looking in the mid-teens or the late teens. I just don't see that happening. I think realistically, just sitting there hoping someone falls to you at 28, you don't have to trade up. You don't have to do anything Latu is in that spot. And, I echo a lot of your similar sentiments, so I'm not going to bang that drum too much, but just what he does as a pass rusher. And he's got a good motor. I don't love the way he plays the run at all times, but he is a high effort player. And I trust that with what I've seen in flashes, he can get better in that regard. But the length, the hand usage, the moves as a pass rusher would be an immediate impact and welcome addition to a Bills position grouping that still has some scary questions at edge. AJ Epinesa is a edge 3. Is he able to kind of jump up and be an edge 2? Is Von Miller able to be an edge 2? I don't think he's going to be an edge 1, or is he a 3? Then you're sitting down Casey Toohill and Kingsley Jonathan. You have a lot of questions at that edge spot. So I think Latu falling, it's a premier player in this class at a premier position. That one is right up there for me as well. Also up there, Johnny Newton from Illinois. And I wanted to tie that to Nikki asking Byron Murphy, ? I would love to say Byron Murphy, who I have ranked ahead of Johnny Newton. I just don't think Byron Murphy falls. The tape is tremendous. He's one of my favorite players in this class. But for me, it was really once the Senior Bowl started and the night before Senior Bowl practices started, so that Monday night, once he pulled out of Senior Bowl practices, I was like, he's going to be cemented in that top 28. I feel like his agent was like, you don't need to do this. Everything's fine. We're pulling you. Similar to Graham Barton. And Barton has risen up the ranks from his tape and what he's been able to do. And so I think Murphy is in a similar category in terms of like guys I just don't expect to fall. I would love, like Byron Murphy is probably the top, but he's at the far end of the spectrum of like not really realistic, but I really, really, really hope. So I didn't include him here because I don't think he's going to fall to 28. But I do think Johnny Newton has the opportunity too. And I know this isn't necessarily the most dire need with the Bills re-signing Daquan Jones and then signing Austin Johnson. So you have a decent top 3 right now in the interior, but you do need a backup 3 tech to Ed Oliver. And I just think Newton is a game wrecker on the interior, and his ability as a pass rusher means that on passing downs and known passing situations, you have the opportunity to have Ed Oliver and Johnny Newton both on the interior on those downs, giving Daquan Jones a rest, allowing him to play more on early downs, and potentially keeping him fresh as the season goes on so he can be a true 3-down game wrecker. And then you have this top 3 strong rotation of Jones, Newton, Ed Oliver, and then Austin Johnson is your backup 1 tech and your 4th rotational piece, who that's a really tremendous top 4. And I know a lot of people are on the train of got to beat Patrick Mahomes, and the way people want it done is score 50 points. So offense. But the name of the game is still stopping Patrick Mahomes. And if you can generate pass rush on the interior, Newton is also no slouch against the run. I'm putting Newton up there. I have him behind Latu just because I think edge is a bigger need than defensive tackle. But I love Johnny Newton. He's arguably one of my favorite players in this class. Arguably my favorite, but definitely one of my favorites. And then I also have an offensive lineman. I like JPJ a lot. I have Barton ahead of him, but the reason I'm saying Barton for this answer instead of JPJ is I do think, because again, it's top 3 players you hope fall to 28. I think JPJ is going to be there at 28. So if I'm hoping, I feel like I have to hope more that Barton is there, but I do think there's a chance that JPJ could be there. And I think he's in that conversation of best player available. I like him and Barton. I flip-flopped like 70 times in terms of ranking which one is my top interior offensive lineman. And for those who don't know, because I know Graham Barton's listed as a tackle, he is projected to the interior because of his frame, his arm length, and he also played center early in his career at Duke before he moved to the outside. I just like how he roots and how he just keeps his feet anchored to the ground like at all times, and then his tenacity, the athleticism, the movement, the hands, the feet. But JPJ is awesome as well. I just think there's a more realistic shot of JPJ being there and not needing hope that he'll fall to 28. I think there's a good chance that he will be there. I think for Barton, you have to hope more just because of how I think the board's going to fall in that top 27. Yeah. So for me, it's Latu, Newton, and then Graham Barton.
I don't think Byron Murphy makes it out of the top 14.
Man, who's the first defensive player that's going to go if Atlanta goes edge?
It could be him.
Yeah, it could be. I feel like it's between him and Dallas Turner.
Atlanta,
maybe Verse if somebody likes Verse.
Chicago. The Eagles could probably trade up because they do.
Yeah.
So I mean, if he was gone at 12, would anybody blink an eye?
No, like the tape is so strong. And I also think he has more one tech in him than Newton does. Like, I think there's more positional versatility and overall just more juice. Plus the frame. Like, I love Newton, but I think the short arms and the stockiness and how he's kind of built might turn some teams away a little bit or devalue him a bit. When you look at Byron Murphy, like, not only is the tape strong and the metrics and everything, but you just like the advanced metrics and his pressure rates and what he does against the run, but you just watch it, like you look at him and how he's built, like he just looks like if you didn't know him or watch football or watch any of his tape and you just saw him all padded up on the field, you would just be like, that guy's good at football.
I have heard similar things to the Ralph Wilson in the comment section that Newton could fall. I had actually had him falling out of the first round.
So this is also one of the reasons why I love him. Yeah, he played with a broken foot for the majority of 2023.
And played well.
Played like a monster. Like,
with a broken foot.
The first game, like Kurt Angle, wrestling fans out there, broken freaking neck, broken freaking foot for Johnny Newton here. And the first game I watched, the second game I watched was that game against Wisconsin. And he just destroys everything in his path. And he's playing on a broken foot. Based on the timeline, he's playing on a broken foot in that game. And he's just beating everybody on the interior. He is destroying the quarterback. And so I wonder, does that foot kind of play in a little bit similar to the Brian Thomas Jr. labrum? It's similar, but different to Latu's neck. Like this is where all these little minute details and nuance pieces come in that affect guys that could potentially fall. And also to your point, I could see Newton falling into the earlier mid-second, which is part of the reason why I like the idea of, in a perfect world, like you trade out at 28 and you get a pick in the low to mid 30s and then you get Newton and now you have a third and you can look at all these other wide receiver options. But
don't put that in your mock draft. People will get mad at you.
Oh no, I've had so many people who are so upset. So upset. All right. Anything else on this topic before we move on to our next?
No, I'm good, man.
Beautiful. All right.
Just one more thing, actually. Just one more thing. Right?
Yep.
I was at the mall the other day.
I knew it.
And I saw a sign on this escalator that said escalator temporarily out of order. And I thought to myself, well, that's a little weird. It should say escalator not temporarily out of order, escalator temporarily stairs. Sorry for your convenience.
I forgot we were doing the Hedberg. The one I was gonna go with was like is a hippopotamus a hippopotamus or just a really cool hippopotamus? So stupid.
I don't have a girlfriend, but I do have a girl who would be really upset if she heard me say that. Okay, all right. We just completely off the rails. I hope everyone's having a wonderful time.
The one I was really going to go to was you ever imagine how clean the inside of a Windex bottle is, but I didn't know how to work it into any part of a conversation. Okay. Next topic. So this next topic is, I shorthand labeled it on the banner here, but outside of the big three, so outside of Marvin Harrison Jr., outside of Malik Neighbors, outside of Rome Odunze, which, if any, wide receiver or wide receivers would you trade up for in round one? So I shorthand labeled it here of wide receivers worth trading up for in round one outside of the big three. Do you have one, Bruce? And it could be anywhere, like I said in our notes, and for those playing at home, it could be anything. It could mean you're trading up into the teens, you're trading up to pick 25 or pick 26, like a Kyrie Elam or Dalton Kincaid type of scenario where you're just moving up a couple picks. So for Bruce, Bruce, I'm falling apart. Are there any wide receivers for you worth trading up for in round one outside of the big three?
There are no receivers that I would be excited about trading up in the first round aside from the big three. However, I can be talked into Mitchell or Brian Thomas if it is the first and a fourth. If you are moving up a 2 or 3 spots to get your guy, Brian Thomas or AD Mitchell, I don't have a super high opinion of AD Mitchell, but the ceiling is there for a reason, right? There's a reason why I had him going high in my predictive mock draft. It's because you look at that ceiling and it's there, right? You see some really, really, really good tape for AD Mitchell. Yep. And I think that you have to look at the entire body of work for him. You have to go back to Georgia and have a conversation about the Georgia tape too. because some of the stuff he flashed at Georgia, he just didn't flash quite as much of in Texas. And he's, from an analytical profile standpoint, it's not good. Like it's a really bad production profile for AD Mitchell. The probabilities don't speak highly in his favor, but you can talk me into it based on a traits-based evaluation. If it is a first and a fourth, and you're moving up a couple spots. Aside from that, I have no interest in moving up to like 15 or 18 for Brian Thomas. I don't think the gap is that high. So I don't think Brian Thomas is like leaps and bounds as a prospect above the tier 2, tier 3 guys. And so for me, I don't get excited about it. Anybody who's not a top 3, but I can be talked into it if the cost is reasonable.
So I have a similar thought, and I'm going to piggyback on one of your points, but real quick, for the big 3, potentially, right? Odunze is there at 9, or I don't know, 10, 11, 12, something like that. What would you be comfortable with trading? Because you put out a really good tweet end of last week or over the weekend, or answered somebody's tweet or something about like what you wouldn't give. I forgot what the tweet was, but it like what you would give up to go and get. I think somebody posted like some trade that they had made in a mock to go up and get Rome Odunze, and you answered it with like, there's no receiver I would trade. I think it was like 2 firsts and 2 2s for like any wide receiver there. Okay, cool. So I was in that neighborhood. All right.
Yeah.
What would you give up to move up to get if Neighbors falls or Odunze falls? Is there a package? I mean, I'm assuming there is, but what would you be comfortable giving up to acquire one of those big 3?
Yeah, if Odunze was there at 12 and you gave up, 28, 128, and next year's first, 141 would probably get you there. Okay. And that's probably the maximum I'd go. And the reason he would probably have to be at 12 for that to work, because if you're at 9, you probably wouldn't take that. So Nikki G just brought it up in the comment section, 28, 128 in a first next year. Yep. That's probably as much as I'm willing to do. And the reason is as much as I'm willing to do is because it doesn't expose massively your ability to recover.
Agreed.
Because you have 2 2s next year and one of them could be high.
Yes.
So for me, when I look at this and I think to myself, okay, everything has to be within reason. And you say, okay, one of the things we don't talk about a lot is expenditures. And we don't think about that you're expending a first round pick to get this player back.
Yes.
So if you trade up and you get Kyer Elam, you expend a 1 and a 4 to get Kyer Elam. If you would have stayed put, you would have expended a 1 to get Kyer Elam. So your hope is that that player becomes more valuable than a 1. That's surplus value. That's what you're going for. So one of the discussions that we had a lot last year after Dalton Kincaid got picked is, what type of workload, what type of production do you have to get from a tight end for him to be worth expending a 1 and a 4? And it's the exact same conversation about trading up for Rome Odunze. This guy traded, the person you're talking about, he traded this year's 1, moved up, then he traded next year's 1, this year's 2, and next year's 2. And what I said was, no player in the NFL who's not a quarterback would I trade 2 1s and 2 2s for.
That's a lot.
None.
That's a lot of premium. That's a lot of premium capital.
I wouldn't do 2 1s and 2 2s for Justin Jefferson, because you'd have to also pay him, $33 million a year. Right. So that's the reason why I wouldn't do that. So would you know what Rome Odunze would have to become for it to be worth 2 1s and 2 2s? Like,
crazy.
It's absurd, because I just said Justin Jefferson's not. So you'd have to be better than the best receiver in football. Okay, sure. If you want to if you want to go down that road and say Rome Odunze will be better than the best receiver in football, maybe one of the best, players in football, period.
Right.
So
you're putting a lot of eggs into that basket. And it's part of the reason why I don't love trading up in general. Just especially I feel like this draft cycle or this draft class, this wide receiver grouping has been so hyped up, and understandably, especially on day 1 and day 2. But I feel like a lot of people are talking about the wide receivers in this class with a lot of absolutes and a lot of concrete thoughts. And the draft and prospects and evaluation is anything but concrete. There is no guarantee to any player, no matter how sure they look or how much of a blue chip or purple chip player they are. There's no guarantees to anything. So sacrificing a ton of capital to put your eggs into a basket that isn't necessarily going to stay sturdy the entire time is something that worries me a little bit. Just in general, like one of my philosophies is, I prefer more swings at the plate or more bites at the apple, throws at the dartboard, whatever verbiage you want to use for the draft. But I am on board for that type of move up for Odunze. If it's 128, and then our first this year, and first next year, or if it's one of the twos or something like that, like I am okay with that just because of the player and caliber of guy that I think he is and the impact that he would make and the fit that he has. But aside from that, I'm in a really similar boat in terms of like the wide receivers outside of the big three that are worth trading up for. None of them are for me. And that's because one of the points that you had, wide receiver like 4 through, where are my notes? Like wide receiver like 4 through like 10 and 11 even, the difference is so negligible to me. And I think one of them is going to be there at 28. So I don't want to trade up. Like if Brian Thomas Jr. falls, cool. I'm okay with that. And this ties into kind of what I mentioned earlier of like, there's so many picks and ways that round one could go in this draft is in general that wouldn't make me upset. If they took Brian Thomas, cool. If they took A.D. Mitchell, cool. If they took Lad McConkey, cool. If they took Xavier Worthy, cool. I don't love Keon Coleman, but I wouldn't hate Keon Coleman being the guy there. If they take Xavier Legette, cool. Like there's so many guys that I think they could take that fill that need and help out in round one that I don't necessarily want to trade up. And Mitchell is one who continues to come through. I've seen a lot of comments coming in regarding him. What I think is tough with AD Mitchell, and I don't think I've said it on the show before. When you watch the tape, and everybody knows this at this point, like the flashes that he shows are elite. Like he shows true wide receiver one flashes that are tremendous. And then he has times where he looks like he doesn't care or he's running very lazily and not putting a lot of effort in. And what I think is difficult in watching the tape and judging him off of that is it's hard to infer the reasoning behind those poorer reps without being in the huddle, without being on the team. We don't know what he's being coached to do, what the expectation is, what's allowed, and even to play devil's advocate for some of it, right? The routes that he runs that are like lazy routes where he runs them at like 30 and 40%, he does that, right? And it looks terrible. And then he does it again and almost lulls the corner to sleep with it and then puts his foot in the ground and explodes out of it and creates like 5 to 6 yards of separation because the corner thought another lazy route was going to come along. So to play devil's advocate, maybe he is using that and trying to manipulate, corners, because he talked about it at the combine where, he doesn't run all of his routes at 100%. He does it to try and manipulate corners. Now, maybe that is what he's doing. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a little ill-advised. And that's not necessarily going to work in the NFL because it's such a timing-based offense and league, and your quarterback and your route distribution and concept. You need to be in this spot at this time, at this moment, and your route is dependent, or what you do, even if you're not getting the ball, helps other guys, yada, yada. But a lot of the laziness that I've seen for Mitchell, you see that in Brian Thomas Jr., you see it in Marvin Harrison Jr., you see it in Xavier Worthy, you see it on a lot of dudes, especially if they're on the backside of these concepts and they know they're not getting the ball, they're not going 100%. They don't even necessarily look like they're going 50. And I feel like it's getting blown up so much when it comes to Mitchell, and rightfully so. And if there is fire to this smoke, I think we'll know based on how far he falls in the first round, because that interview process is going to be so important for him, because coaches and teams and GMs are going to be able to sit down with him in the interview process and decide right there, and also kind of figure out if there is fire to that smoke in terms of, okay, is he running these lazier routes or these poorer reps because he doesn't care? Or is it because he's trying to manipulate defenders or he's trying to set them up later? Like, is there a good reasoning or process behind the end result? And maybe it's a little ill-advised and they have to tweak it, because I don't think he's lazy all the time. And even one of the comments, John saying AD Mitchell wasn't blocking for Xavier, there's times where he's one of the best blocking receivers on tape. Go to the Big 12 game against Oklahoma State. They run a 4th and 1 and he's the front side blocker and he drives the corner like 15 yards downfield. He does that a couple times throughout like games that you watch. And then there's times, where he like looks like he could care less if he's trying to block. I think he's a bit of an enigma, but the flashes are so strong. And again, I wouldn't hate if the Bills took him at 28. Are there some red flags? Sure. But there's so many receivers that I think that will be available at 28 that are in that tier after the big 3, whether it's tier 2 or tier 3 or even tier 4. But I think the difference between all those tiers is negligible enough that kind of like why bother trading up for one when the value is still good. That's also why I hope that a bunch of these guys fall and they can trade back to the mid 30s and kind of pick their poison because there's so many receivers and or players in general on their board that are still available.
We do this thing where we only acknowledge the flaws of receivers we don't like, and we don't acknowledge the flaws of receivers we do like. So for the people who are huge Xavier Legette fans, turn on the Tennessee tape for me. Okay. Turn on the Tennessee tape and just watch him get eaten alive by the Tennessee press and just go, okay, awesome. All the things that you thought you didn't want to take Xavier Worthy for, right? You want a true X. You need somebody who can go get you a bucket on the outside, can line up on the line of scrimmage, beat press, get down the field. Great. Awesome. You say that Xavier Worthy can't do it, but then you say Xavier Legette can. But we have evidence that Legette can really get erased by that kind of thing. So now you have another player that you have to kind of build around. You have to hide on your offense. He's just bigger. Like we just assume because he's bigger, he can get off press. Like that's just not how it works, right? And that's why the DK Metcalf stuff really bothers me because DK Metcalf, I was not super high on for medical reasons, right? Foot and neck coming out.
Scary.
I was like, whoa, boy.
Yeah, no,
okay, foot and neck. I was like, yeah, no. But DK Metcalf's release package coming out was elite. And you saw, okay, he's explosive down the field. He can get out of break. Like you can just line him up there. He can just go get you a bucket. Right? If he never gets any better than that, you can line him up on the outside. He can win vertical routes and go get you a bucket against press. And we don't acknowledge those things in the players we like. We just only acknowledge those exact same flaws, mind you, in the players we don't like. So we say, well, Xavier Worthy, I don't want Xavier Worthy. You know, he's too small. He can't get off press. You know, you'd really have to kind of build an offense around him. But I do want Xavier Legette, who you'd have to do the same thing for, right? Now he's a different player, but the weakness is the same.
He's 6'1", 220 pounds. He can get off press.
Yeah. Again, turn on Tennessee. Like it's just, so for me, this is the scenario where it's okay. Like that, it's okay to like a player and then also acknowledge that flaw. Yes. Like that's fine. Like those two, it's not either I like this guy and he's perfect or I don't like these guys and they're terrible. Yeah. Like that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So, mind you, I like Xavier Legette, right?
Yeah,
I like him. Now, I have some concerns about him, but I like him, and I have some concerns. Applies to basically everybody.
and that's what I think is driving me so nuts about so much of like the conversation about wide receivers. Like, I remember talking to somebody at the Senior Bowl who loved Troy Franklin, and was like. And like Xavier Legette did something. He was like, man, I'm out on Legette. And I was like, oh, why are you out on Legette? And he's like, he just doesn't have a complete route tree. And I was like, don't you love Troy Franklin? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, you don't think there's any like hypocrisy in your evaluation? He was like, what do you mean? And I was like, all right, never mind. Good talking with you. Like, I'm out. Just
good chat.
Yeah, exactly. Good chat. Thanks. Nice to meet you. Like, there's just so much. And the lazy thing, again, I do think it's a different caliber or class from Mitchell. But it happens with Mark. Again, like I said, like all the guys that it happens for, and it's happening a lot across college football. Myself and Russell Brown talked about it going into the combine. Like it's something you just see more nowadays. Like guys aren't going 100 miles an hour 100% of the time. And if we're going to drag one guy for it, I think we should drag everybody accordingly. Or just, again, like some of the conversations about what guys can do and what they can't do. And I don't know if it's highlight watching or just listening to necessarily like wrong information, but I feel like the tape doesn't lie. And there's just so many assumptions about so many of these wide receivers. And again, too, like your point, like pointing out negatives doesn't necessarily like mean you hate a guy. Like I've said for so much, like, oh, Brian Thomas Jr., like, I don't think he has a complete route tree. Now, I think some of it, like I always say, like, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Maybe he can run a full route tree. Maybe he just wasn't asked to do that at LSU because they were just like, yo, just go be big and fast and outrun everybody. And we're going to throw you slot fades and drags. And that's all you need to do. But he doesn't have that, like that tree. But then people on the other side will talk and be like, oh, so you hate Brian Thomas? I'm like, no, I like Brian Thomas. Like, but you have to be honest with the analysis of what the pros and cons are. And that's also a part of that package for me with everybody after the big three in those next tiers of like wide receiver 4 through 11, even 12. You can make a case for or against all of them in a variety of ways. And depending on what kind of receiver you're looking for or what need you're trying to fill, those pros and cons are going to be weighed differently in your mind and weighed differently for your roster. And I just think it's a conversation that's not being had enough. It's just kind of blindly looking at the positives for guys and being like, oh, this is the done deal. Look at this guy. He's awesome. And it's just the honest or next level contextual conversation, I feel like isn't happening with receivers. And I feel like it's worse this year at that position grouping than I really have ever seen in like a long time.
We love Leggett because he's Metcalf, but the guy who's actually more Metcalf, which is Brian Thomas, then we don't like him because he does all the flaws that Metcalf had.
Bro, it's just,
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
I feel like they're nice. It's just, or even some of the metrics, like people recently have been pointing out to me because I like Javon Baker and people have been pointing out like his drop rate. And I'm like, man, his drop rate sucks. Like, we can't have him. And it's funny how people like point out, and I know this is more of an easier accessible metric than what I'm about to say, but nobody talks about how good he was in yards per route run or EPA per target, or like talks about the film and these catches, or talks about the type of drops that he had. Like, and I think it goes back to your initial point with all this conversation is, and kind of go into that confirmation bias. Like you seek out what your preconceived notions already are. And so if you're not high on Baker, you seek out something that shows you that he's not. If you think Xavier Leggett is awesome, you're just going to go watch that clip against Mississippi State where he takes a 5-yard drag route 70 yards to the house and hits 23 miles per hour. And you're going to be like, done. I love him. He's the greatest receiver ever. And I think it's really morphing and warping the receiver conversation and creating separation in those tiers after the first tier that I don't really think exists. And again, which is part of the reason why I'm cool just sitting there at 28, because I'll take a handful of these guys because I think the differences are negligible. Granted, their sizes and frames and skill sets and traits may be different, but I just think what they can be and floors relative to ceilings, it's just such a negligible conversation. And that's why, like, why trade up for one? If you really think Brian Thomas is going to be the guy, cool, I get it, because he ticks all these boxes of what a prototypical X could and should be. But I mean, I don't know. Like, I like AD Mitchell just as much, if not a little bit more at times, but then he's got these other like red flags and it's kind of scary, but maybe kind of not. And maybe there's a reason, but we don't know the reason. So we can just go off the film. Anything else on this point before we move on to the next?
No, we are, as per usual, drastically behind.
Oh no. I hate us.
Do you though? Do you though?
I hate myself more than I hate you. It's me. I hate myself.
Oh, no. You can't hit me with the "it's not you, it's me." I invented "it's not you, it's me."
All right, it's you. You're damn right, it's me. That's not Mitch Hedberg for those who are playing at home. That is Seinfeld. All right, we're sticking on the wide receiver conversation, the wide receiver train. If you're a WGR listener, this is right up your alley. Nice. Costanza. Nice.
Can't stand you.
I can't stand you. Tropic of Cancer. Costanza. Can't stand you. How many wide receivers and what kind of wide receivers do the Bills need to get or come away from this draft with?
I'd love for them to double dip. And specifically, I would like two archetypes. Number one, I've used the phrase "go get you a bucket" more this offseason in the last couple of weeks than I have in a long time. So I think part of this just comes to understanding positions when it comes to wide receiver. And one of the things that the Buffalo Bills need right now is they need someone who can play X. Now, obviously, we go through the positional stuff when it comes to wide. It's not just a wide receiver. It's specifically a type of wide receiver who can specifically be on the line of scrimmage and can win against press, win vertically, usually the traits you like to see there, and some of these things are they're complementary, but in a negative way. And I want to explain this to you. So when you have a receiver on your team who's going to play X, they're going to be farther away from the rest of the offense. They're going to be on the line of scrimmage. They're going to be facing a lot more press. They're going to have the added challenge of having the sideline usually on one of their shoulders. And so because of this, you need people who can stack cornerbacks. You need people who have body control on the sidelines. You need obviously some vertical ability. You need people who can win that deep in-breaking routes, those backside digs that are so popular in so many offenses.
Odell Beckham. Mitchell, cough, cough.
Yes, AD Mitchell. There you go. AD Mitchell, cough, cough, right? You need those types of players. But the problem is that the traits that are necessary to be able to get those types of players hurt you when you are playing elsewhere. So let me walk you through this, okay? If I want somebody who's going to be a slot player, okay? I want someone with great hip flexibility, and specifically I want someone who can get their hips low. I want low hip elevation because you need to be able to accelerate out of your breaks and make separation quickness. Well, lower hip elevation, people who are shorter, has a tendency to help with this because people who are shorter have a tendency to have lower hip elevation, which means they have the ability to get lower in their breaks, which means they can accelerate out and create short area quickness. People with lower hip elevation have a tendency to be shorter people. People who are shorter have a tendency to have less length. If you're shorter, your arms aren't as long. If your arms aren't as long, it usually hurts you with press, which then hurts your ability to play on the outside. So all these things are interconnected, but not in a good way. So it's not just, I want a receiver. It's, I have Curtis Samuel who can play on the outside, but we'd like to play him in the slot. I have Khalil Shakir who can play on the outside, but I like to play in the slot. I have Dalton Kincaid who can play on the outside, but like to play him in the slot. It's not just I need a receiver. It's I need an X. I need someone who can play the X position. So Ralph Wilson puts out. Troy Franklin is one of those players. Troy Franklin can beat press, right? I think Ladd McConkey can beat press and play on the outside. I think Brian Thomas Jr. can do that. I know Javon Baker can do that. One of the reasons why I consistently do that, it's not just because he's a good player, it's because he's a good fit for what the team needs. So that's the first type of player that I want. I want an X. The second type of player I want is I want a return man.
Oh,
we don't talk about this at all. So who is the current return man for the Buffalo Bills? Like right now?
Ty Johnson?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Unless they want to get sexy and maybe do Curtis Samuel.
Like, I mean, Khalil Shakir, maybe?
Yeah, fair.
Like that's the guy. I want a return man, and I can get them in this draft. I can get a receiver early day 3 who can come in and be vertical and win down the field, be explosive, add that speed element, which is another aspect that we need, and can make sure that you can take advantage of some. I think you're going to have an opportunity to have 1 or 2 games this year that are swung by the fact that teams are still figuring out kickoffs. I truly believe there's a window of opportunity here. If you can get ahead of it and be a little bit more on the cutting edge, that you can take advantage and steal a touchdown or 2 because people are still trying to figure it out if you have a return man. And so those are the 2 types of receivers that I'd love for the Bills to come out of the draft with.
I'm in a similar boat. So this is going to be a nice and tidy segment. Yeah, I've been clamoring for that X receiver spot, and it doesn't have to be. I think when people hear X, I feel like they conflate it with like the true number 1 or true receiver. And I know that's kind of been prototypically or traditionally the standard, like, especially when someone's like, oh, give me an example of like a prototypical or traditional X. And you're like, oh, Julio Jones. And so the assumption is like, oh, that guy's an X. And then someone will be like, well, is Tyreek Hill an X? It's like, no, there is Z. And it's like, okay, so then the X isn't the number 1. I don't think you need an X necessarily and have him be your number 1 receiver. Now, yes, I think a lot of the guys that I gravitate towards in round 1 have that X size, frame, and skill set. The Brian Thomases, the AD Mitchells. I don't think Ladd McConkey is a true X, but to your point, I think he has some X pieces that are underrated. Like, I don't want him living on the outside all the time and always trying to get vertical, but he can get vertical and he can beat press, but the size and frame is going to limit him in 50-50 balls, ball winning, separating at the catch point, little things like that. But I think that true X, which is part of the reason why I gravitated towards Javon Baker since before the Senior Bowl, back when I thought he was going to go in like the third or fourth round. Now maybe he creeps up into the second. Just his size and frame and skill set and how it fits in. And plus what he is as a blocker, it just fits so well with this Bills roster and this depth chart and what this offense is. And also, I think within this conversation, something I want to mention earlier and I forgot until right now, which is annoying because I had it in my notes earlier. I just glossed over it. I think a lot of this conversation is dependent upon what Dalton Kincaid is in 2024 and beyond. Because if Dalton Kincaid is your true one, then that changes the kind of draft philosophy you have when it comes to receiver in this draft. If Dalton Kincaid is going to be your true one, also, X conversation, this is, I don't want to get too much on a tangent here because it's a longer conversation, bigger conversation, but you could do some things with Dalton Kincaid and line him up at the X and make the defense have to answer questions they potentially don't want to have to answer. But if you're going to treat Dalton Kincaid as your true number one, then maybe you just need auxiliary pieces in support of him with different skill set pieces or traits that allow him to thrive more or open the field up more for him or allow those auxiliary pieces to succeed even though their skill set may be more limited or they don't have all the traits because of how they pair with Dalton Kincaid and how that fits in the offense. Now, if Dalton Kincaid is just going to be a really good tight end and be a 2 and be more of, when he was drafted to be a secondary piece, potentially to Stephon Diggs. I don't think this Diggs move was something that the Bills had planned from last year based on the contract they gave him and all these pieces. So if that's still the thought process where Kincaid is more of the secondary option, which is a great secondary option, then I feel like you have to look for more of that receiver with that true wide receiver one upside, a lot of these guys that we've talked about. But regardless, you need that X piece. And I've said it a million times on the show. I've said it on the film room with Eric. I think it's a Daniel Jeremiah quote, like building your receiver room like a basketball lineup. You need your point guard, your 2 guard, small forward, power forward, center. The Bills need that true X type of size and frame and skill set. And I know Matt Collins has some of the size and frame pieces, checked off, but he doesn't necessarily have the skill set or the traits to occupy that spot. So I do think you need to come away from that X spot. And then I'm in a similar boat. The return piece is great, and that's not something I had considered, and I'm embarrassed and ashamed for how churlish I was in not considering that. But I was in a similar ballpark. Give me someone that can be a potential X. Doesn't necessarily have to be a true number one, but someone that could be a potential X. And then the other receiver, so I think they need 2. The other receiver I want to see them come away with, give me speed or give me the ability to separate either with speed or with route running. Give me yards after catchability. Give me some combination where I can put the ball in your hands and you can do damage or you can stretch the defense. I need that other receiver to either be athleticism based or speed based. Ideally, your potential X would have some speed to him, which is why I gravitate a little more towards Brian Thomas Jr. and A.D. Mitchell and those guys. But I'm cool with taking Javon Baker and then pairing him with Malik Washington or Taj Washington and just having him be a speed burner. Or even though it's kind of maybe like for like, I really like Jamari Thrash and I wouldn't mind that option because of how he can separate and his ability to generate yards after catch, even though he's not a true burner. Ran a 4.48, but I don't think he plays like a 4.48 on tape. So give me that potential X and then pair it with somebody who has speed and or the ability to separate with their speed or route running and yards after catch. I want to boost the athleticism of this wide receiver group. So give me that wing defender with the athleticism. Give me a 3-and-D guy, and then also give me that power forward at the same time and really round out this wide receiver group to go with your 2 guard and Curtis Samuel, the point guard and Khalil Shakir, and then whatever the hell we label Dalton Kincaid as, even though he's a tight
end. Yeah, I'm good with it. And I really appreciate how deep you went into the basketball metaphors. I think that was important.
I appreciate a good metaphor. A good metaphor and a good analogy are things that I'm a huge fan of. Last topic here, Bruce, and then we are going to bid you adieu. Top 3 priorities for the Bills in this 2024 NFL draft. This one was already on my list, but I thought it was especially poetic because, again, we're coming full circle. The last time you were on the show, we were ranking the priorities for this Bills team. So much has really changed since then, mainly the Stephon Diggs move. So the top 3 priorities for the Buffalo Bills in the 2024 NFL draft. The floor is yours.
Number 1, X wide receiver
Mhm.
for all the reasons we already talked about.
Yes.
Number 2, edge rusher. I am not counting on Von Miller.
Mhm.
I think it's just wise to not count on people in their mid 30s. I think it's just smart,
Coming off of
just
2
in
CL
general.
surgeries and
Just a good idea in general.
Yeah.
There was a stand-up comic who was not Mitch Hedberg. I think it was Taylor Tomlinson, who said one time she was talking about being in your 20s. And she goes, everybody wants to go back to their 20s because they always say that, I didn't have any responsibility in my 20s,
Mm.
And then you think, do you remember why you didn't have
Yeah.
any responsibility in your 20s? It was because you were a loser and nobody trusted you to be competent at anything. Your nana would be like, listen, Bruce, can you bring napkins to the party? Do you think you can handle that? Just bring napkins? Yeah, Nana, I can bring napkins. Yeah. Don't you dare go to Dollar General on your way here. Get actual napkins. That's the way I feel about 35-year-old pass rushers. Like, just you can't count on them. So to me, edge rusher is a meaningful thing.
Mhm.
And the third thing is, I would really like to have another plan aside from Daquan Jones at 32 for your next one tech. I think one of the things that losing Daquan Jones showed the Buffalo Bills is that you need Daquan Jones. And when you have a 32-year-old one tech who is a critical piece of your defense, I would feel a lot better if you didn't have just a massive void hanging out behind him.
That's fair.
And that's not to say that I'm not, interested in Deshaun Williams and Austin Johnson, but I would like somebody that is a one tech that can be a meaningful piece of this defensive line rotation and can easily slide into Daquan's spot in 2 years.
That's fair. Do you value that? So obviously you do. Give me your reasoning for why you value that more than a backup 3 tech right now, given the presence of Austin Johnson. No, though he isn't the long-term option at one tech after Daquan.
Only the age differential between Daquan and Ed Oliver. That's it.
Okay.
It's succession planning. So I view the need to be similar in talent. Behind Ed Oliver, you have a player who I'm like, about. Behind Daquan Jones, you have a player I'm about. The difference is Daquan Jones is 32 and Ed Oliver isn't. So that's the tiebreaker for me. It's succession planning. It's not that if you get another 3 tech, I couldn't make an argument that need on paper in a vacuum is just as notable as that at 1 tech. The difference is the 1 tech's 32.
I echo a lot of these similar sentiments, so I'm going to ask you a question, and then we'll wrap up this segment. What are your thoughts on safety, given where we stand, and where did that come close to cracking your top 3? Okay.
It did, because I am established, not a gung-ho Taylor Rapp is totally the answer at safety guy. But I just trust Sean McDermott to be able to grab somebody and make it work a little bit better on the back end than I do on the front end. Because, well, quite frankly, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, we've shown that he can do that. And so even in situations where you had a less than effective Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, and you had to throw in DeMar Hamlin for multiple games, who I thought looked fine, right, when he was in and starting. And so I think that the system, you get a heady instinctual player, you can get somebody in the 4th, 5th round. I mean, I think that in my final mock, like not spoiler, it's already up. It's already up on BuffaloRumblings.com. It's not a spoiler. Anyone who's read it is already going to read it, right? For me, I took Jalen Simpson in the 5th round.
Sorry, I love Jalen Simpson.
If you want a versatile player who's, he's going to fall for a reason, it's because he's small, right?
Yeah.
And he played that inside nickel free safety role for Auburn. But if you want to have a third safety,
continue, I got excited.
If you want to have a third safety who can come down and play, you can play double slots with him and Taron Johnson. You can play a lot more dime if you want to play dime. And so I think that he's a player that you can get on day 3. And I think you can come in, and I think that, there are people out there who are going to think Simpson's a corner. That's the man coverage ability, I think.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the kind of player. It's just the only reason that it didn't make my top 3 is because I just have more faith in the defensive backs coaching and the system to be able to cover that a little bit more than you can cover something closer to the line of scrimmage.
Is that your favorite way of addressing safety? Like you get someone on day 3 in particular, in this example, like Jalen Simpson, like that's the way you patch it. Like you're not, is it, do you acquire that 3rd round pick and you get Cam Kitchens or Javon Bullard or another safety, or do you prefer going that day 3 option because of the track record and pedigree of McDermott?
I'm completely fine with Bullard or Bishop or, Kitchens in the 3rd round or something like that. I think Bullard's probably a 2nd round pick, but I don't think that Tyler Nubin is on the plate. I think Nubin will go high 2nd round, and I don't think the Bills are going to value it that highly. And I love Nubin. Okay. Just a huge Nubin fan, right?
Is he your safety one?
He is.
Oh, mine too. Cool.
He is. So he is. And I know this is we're going a little bit off topic, but Dadrion Taylor Demerson, if he shows up in round 3, I wouldn't be mad. So I'm just saying.
Man, this safety class is so weird. Like I feel like, and I say this all the time, evaluation is different. You ask 10 different people, like their evaluations and thoughts and rankings, you'll get like 10 different answers. But this safety class, like some people have Nubin as one, some people have Jaden Hicks, some people have Demerson, some people have, like Nate Tice has Malik Mustafa. I love Mustafa. My 3 favorite safeties in this class are, well, I should say 4. I like Nubin. He's my 1. Cam Kitchens is still my safety 2. I really like Malik Mustafa, and I love Jalen Simpson. I love that you said Jalen Simpson. Just that 1 year of safety, which was this past year for Auburn, and you're watching him drive and close and break up passes on Brock Bowers and Malik Neighbors in the SEC, and I forget the Georgia receiver who he mosses for that interception over the middle of the field. And the size is a concern, right? Being sub 180 at like 178, 179. I'd like him to add a little more muscle. And I do think his angles need to improve coming from depth, along with, his angles have to be so perfect now because he doesn't have any size on him. So arm tackles aren't going to work because everybody's going to run through his arms because he's a skinnier guy. But the willingness is there. And just what he did in 1 year at safety, like this is a guy who was a corner every other year, and watching his coverage ability in zone, man, match coverages, and against the caliber of opponent, I keep coming back to Jalen Simpson every time. And like my dream, get him and see if you can push him as close to 190 pounds as possible without losing all the speed. He runs in the 4.4s, and just, I really like his upside if you can just get him a little bit thicker. But even if you can't, he has the option to be that like kind of a dime dude, like you said, or play him in the slot. He's just so intriguing to me. But yeah, this safety class is wild. And I'm down a little bit on Demerson. He just, for whatever reason, doesn't do it for me. Though I think the speed is awesome. And some of his balls.
Is it because you hate me? Is that what it is?
It might be. Or it might be, I really didn't like how short his pants were in the Texas game. Like he was basically wearing shorts with no pads, and it pissed me off.
Yeah, but when Josh Allen does it, we love it.
No, I still hate it. It's just, I hate that. And I have an irrational hatred when people leave their mouth guard out, like Stephon Diggs. Why have it attached to your helmet if you're never going to put it in? It serves no purpose. Just don't.
You know why it is, right? So you remember when having a wallet chain was all the rage?
Yeah.
It's just that for football players.
I hate it so much.
It's the dangly.
It's just jokes. I'm waiting for everybody to get in with that. So she said it's just out there flopping around, and it's just
out there flopping around, man,
obstructing your view. It's just it drives me.
It just totally gets in the way. Yeah. Sometimes it flops out there. You got to kind of like hold it down.
Yeah. It's all just flaccid. And all right, I'm stopping there. Yeah, it drives me nuts. But yeah, the safety class is really interesting. A lot of these pieces are very interesting. And I'm going to continue on and answer a couple more questions that we got from the chat that I starred, wrap this thing up. But Bruce, you have done your due diligence here. I'm going to send you on your merry way. You crushed it as always. There is not another person I wanted to have this conversation with. You are genuinely, and I've said it before, and we've talked about it, you are genuinely one of my favorite people in general as a person, but especially as far as guests to have on this show. You crushed this episode as I hoped you would. I had a blast with you. Just in case people don't know who you are and what you do, things are changing a little bit for you now, and we'll see what's on the horizon, but the floor is yours. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, and where they can find you.
This is the first time that I have ever said this without an active podcast.
I know. I was wondering.
It's very strange. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Bruce Exclusive. I formerly had a show on the Buffalo Rumblings podcast network, but I don't anymore. So for me, I am not employed in the podcasting space right now. currently evaluating options. I do still write for Buffalo Rumblings as of the time of this recording, as mentioned about his my mock draft that is getting a lot of negative attention.
I was going to say
so
shredded because everybody's just so angry at every mock that isn't exactly what they want.
So mad at me. They're so mad, Anthony. And here's the thing. It's a predictive one. Like, it isn't even my preference. It's just what I think could reasonably happen.
How dare you think this?
Like, I didn't even make the picks. I just made the predictions. I don't even like two of the players on this mock. I just think it lines up with the Bills and I can see them do it. I'm like, why are you yelling at me?
I'm a person. This is just what I think is going to happen.
I'm a person.
I'm thinking of King of Queens. That's King of Queens. Is that what you're referencing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's when you asked me. Yes.
It's when
because Carrie jerks him back and forth when she needs
she pulls him back and forth to be the expert witness or not be the person. And eventually he looks at her and he goes, "I'm a person.
You came to me. I know. Don't ever come to me again." Okay, understood. And then it's all for that, just for Doug to come in. And the only question they ask him is like, "Who do you work for?" And he's like, "IPS, International Parcel Service." And they're like, "In your estimation, do you think most packages are delivered like reasonably on time?" And he's like, "Yes." And they're like, "All right, that's all. No further questions."
Yeah, that was the whole expert witness thing. You and I just went on a tangent that literally like 7 people are going to get.
That's the goal, though. I like to niche down and niche down and niche down because when you go with those real niche examples, I feel like it gets appreciated more.
Rather than when it lands on someone, they just love it and they just feel awesome. And I want that. Like when you're listening to that one show and they hit that one reference that you get and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." Like there's like 4 of my listeners, former listeners, I guess, who watch The Good Place. And I'll make a Good Place reference. I'm like, "Hey, you made a Good Place reference." I'm like, "Yes, there we go." Anyway, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Bruce Exclusive. And stay tuned for potentially information coming in the next, I don't know, couple of weeks about whether or not you will be able to continue to listen to Bruceisms or not. Anthony, you're a gentleman and a scholar.
Thank you, sir. You are always welcome around these parts in whatever form or fashion. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. I'll be DMing you after to apologize for going over like I always do, which it's just us at this point.
It's just the thing that we do.
It's just the thing. Like we both mean well. We both commit to it. And it just, it is what it is. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. I appreciate you as always. I'll see you in the DMs. Godspeed. And I wish you the best going forward and we'll see what happens.
That's the way the cookie crumbles. Catch you later.
Later, Bruce. One of the best, Mr. Bruce Nolan. One of my favorites. The only person to ever call out my use of one of my favorite people, but I don't say it often. And I do say it for him every time he comes on the show because he is absolutely tremendous. Also, this was awesome, Sophie. I appreciate this comment saying you two are incredibly compatible. More Bruce and Ant. Yeah, I love talking ball with Bruce and we're compatible and we vibe off one another well. So it was awesome having him here. I thought this was a very fun episode. Now, I want to go back because there were several comments that I starred as we went through. This one was a good one from John, and I wanted to put it up to the chat too to see what your answers are. So John at Discontinued Foods, his question was not related to this draft, but just out of curiosity, in your fandom, which draft pick has had the greatest excited when picked to eventual disappointment swing and vice versa? I think, so I thought about it initially, and then I didn't want to give too much thought because I was going to zone out while Bruce was talking. I think this probably is low-hanging fruit. I feel like this will be a lot of people's answers. Like the greatest excited when picked to eventual disappointment swing, probably Sammy Watkins. Actually, yeah, and Charles already said it, like Sammy. I do want to give it with a caveat, though. I was a little disappointed when they picked Sammy, not holistically, but I really thought they were trading up for Khalil Mack, and I wanted it to be Khalil Mack. And I thought it was going to be Khalil Mack, especially with like Rex Ryan being a defensive coach, the needs at the time. I really thought it was going to be Khalil Mack. So there was a little disappointment in me because it wasn't Khalil, but Sammy Watkins was awesome. Like, and at that time, I wasn't watching all 22. I wasn't in the space that I am now. Like, I still loved football and had a lot of the knowledge that I have now, but I didn't study Sammy Watkins on tape. So I didn't have any of my own individual evaluation. My evaluation was listening to respected people that I listened to and watched on TV. I wasn't listening to podcasts at the time. I was literally just watching ESPN and NFL Network. And everybody and their mother told me how great Sammy Watkins was going to be. So that tempered some of my disappointment. But yeah, it's got to be Sammy Watkins. I mean, dude set the world on fire at Clemson, was traded up for top 5 pick. And then just to see, not even just with the Bills, but then going from the Bills and just kind of being a journeyman with, and I was even thinking of it now, like I forgot he was on the Rams because we traded him to the Rams. So he was a Ram. He was a Chief. He was a Raven. I don't even remember all the teams he was on. It's so wild for a dude that was so hyped. And that's also part of, I hate to use that example, but tying that into a piece I mentioned earlier of why even everybody, any guy who seems like the most sure prospect, concrete, done and dusted, this dude is going to hit. He's going to be sick. Sammy Watkins was that guy. Good call, Pops. Yeah, he was a Green Bay Packer. I feel like Sammy played for every team in the NFL, but probably some CFL teams. It's wild. He was a hands down, done and dusted, no doubt about it type of dude. Blue chip, purple chip guy, S tier type of prospect in a class that included Mike Evans and Odell. He was a tier above all those guys. And he flamed out, all things considered. Yeah, K. Morty says in the comment, yeah, he won a Super Bowl. He got one with Kansas City. Also, he had that kind of the catch that iced it, if I remember correctly, on Richard Sherman. He beat him, I think, on a little stutter go or a double move and beat him up the sideline, and Mahomes hit him. And I think that iced it or helped win the game. I don't remember what the try was. I try to forget that Super Bowl because I hate the Chiefs. But yeah, it's probably excited when picked to eventual disappointment swing is Sammy Watkins. The other one is fun, though. So if we do vice versa, who, when picked, was disappointment and then swung to the excited side? Ooh, I don't know if I had anybody that I was disappointed and that ended up being good. I wouldn't say so. I don't think I can say disappointed, but what Kyle Williams became was tremendous. Just his journey in terms of where he was picked and what he became. That's a really good one for somebody that was just a lot of the guys who I was disappointed on never really, but I was disappointed on Dante Whitner. I was disappointed on John McCargo. I was disappointed on Aaron Maben. Ooh, Nikki saying Josh Allen. That's a good answer. That's probably a good answer for a lot of people. I wasn't disappointed with Allen. I had Sam Darnold as my QB1 that year, and I still will maintain to this day. I think if Sam Darnold went to a better situation, Sam Darnold would have a much, much, much different career. But the Bills couldn't get Darnold. I didn't like Josh Rosen. Baker was off the board. So, a lot of people saying Josh Allen. That's nice. Bernard is a good answer there too. Yeah, I wasn't down on the Josh Allen pick because I didn't like Josh Rosen. And so I was like, okay, fine. The QB I really wanted was Sam Darnold. He was already off the board, so whatever. But a lot of the guys, that I was disappointed on ended up continuing to disappoint me. I guess if I had to go off I wasn't completely mad at the Bernard pick, but I did question it given the other needs and then still having Tremaine and Milano. But in hindsight, okay. And plus you go with the verbiage. What is it? The old proverbial, don't wait until you have a need to address that need, try to do it a year ahead of time or whatever. So again, it's part of the reason why I'm advocating for a corner potentially in round 1 this year or on day 2 early in the second round or even in the third, just because, again, addressing corner before you really need to, and it's a premium position. I guess Bernard would probably be there. I was disappointed, not necessarily with the player, more so of just the position that was picked, a little with the player. And then, compared to what he's been, I think that is a really good one. Oh, Boogie Basham. That's another one. I was disappointed when they took Basham, and I was disappointed throughout. I think the most disappointed I've ever been. Oh, that's a good podcast episode, a quick little 30-minute one, most disappointed you ever were for a Bills pick. All the ones that I was disappointed on ended up being disappointing. And I'm not just saying that to pat myself on the back. I didn't like the Basham pick. I didn't like Dante Whitner, but he ended up being all right for the Bills and then ended up being good with San Francisco, I guess. But I was down on McCargo. I didn't love the Lossman pick. I hated the EJ Manuel pick, and not just because I'm a Miami Hurricanes guy and I don't like Florida State. A lot of the ones that I was down on ended up kind of confirming my disappointment, which is unfortunate. This was a really good question from Josh earlier. Josh, I hope you're still around. And John from Discounted Foods, I hope you're still around too. So Josh says, hey, Ant, if we double dip at wide receiver, which pair would you like us to see? This is a good one too. And those in the chat, feel free to play. If we double dip at wide receiver, which pair would you like to see us take? So I'm going to go back to a tweet that I tweeted a month or so ago and it kind of goes into the answers I gave earlier, in terms of like what skill sets or traits you're looking for the receivers to have, I want a pair that equals a potential X receiver and then a fun kind of just blanket statement, a fun skill set piece on the other end. Oh, like Charles says in the comment there, Javon Baker and Malik Washington. That's the type of example I'm in, right? So give me Javon Baker and Malik Washington. Give me Javon Baker and Xavier Worthy. Give me A.D. Mitchell and Malik Washington. Give me Brian Thomas Jr. and Jamari Thrash, right? Some kind of combination of a prototypical X and then another receiver that can separate with speed, athleticism, and or route running, or all of those three. Yeah, Dennis in the chat says Worthy and Baker. Yeah, it's appreciate it. Seeing the comment there, Josh. I'm glad you're still here. Thank you for sticking around. I knew I was going to get to this question. I just wanted to make sure you were still going to be here for it. I love this question. This one's super fun because it really gets into like the mix and match. I'd be cool with Ladd McConkey and Javon Baker, like that type of. Give me just a fun guy. And I hate to use this kind of blanket statement, but just a fun guy. Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy, Malik Washington, Taj Washington, Jamari Thrash, like so much guys like that. And then pair it with that prototypical X, Javon Baker, A.D. Mitchell, Brian Thomas Jr. I'll put Xavier Legette into that X category because of the size and the frame. And I do think, again, I think Xavier Legette is not prototypical, is projection based in general. Like you need to coach up his route tree and his stem work and the finer points of the game. And I think the release package is part of it to Bruce's point. But I do think he can fit into that X mold. So give me Xavier Legette and again, one of the smaller type of fun guys. Or, that's a good one from Nikki. Nikki says Pearsall and Brendan Rice. Brendan Rice is a really interesting one, especially if you're looking at potential X's that aren't the most popular hit on names like we've talked about. It was Dane Brugler's answer when I had him on the show last week, like who's an X receiver that can be had on day 2 or day 3, like outside of the big name guys in round 1. And he went with Brendan Rice. So that could be a combination. I don't love Rice, but I like what he potentially can be. And even what he is now for a little bit. Although I'd like someone a bit sexier. I would, pair that up, right? I think Ricky Pearsall is a fun name to Nikki's point there, like Pearsall and Baker, Pearsall and Brendan Rice. I like Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint from Georgia, but he's more late day 3, might even fall into undrafted free agency territory. Although I don't necessarily think that will happen with him just because of some of the things that he offers, or even, again, Keon Coleman and Jalen McMillan. Like there's so many combinations. I really like Jalen McMillan. I like Jalen McMillan more than I like Jalen Polk. Just kind of speaking on similar wide receivers together, our Washington wide receivers together. Anthony Gould from Oregon State is in that fun wide receiver category. Charles. Xavier Legette and Ryan Flournoy from Southeast Missouri State. That's a cool one. Malachi Corley is also an interesting name, like just because he plays like a running back once he gets the ball in his hands. That's a cool one, Pete, saying Worthy and then Flournoy in the 6. Oh, awesome, Josh. I appreciate that comment. Definitely, bro. I appreciate you acknowledging it. No, of course. That's a great comment. I appreciate you being here and being willing to ask an awesome question and just being here in general and support me and the brand. That's awesome. Malachi Corley is one who I've come around on more. I didn't have access to a lot of his tape throughout this draft process. And then I did in the last several weeks or couple of weeks, and I just didn't get around to it until like last week. So I haven't spoken about Malachi Corley a lot, but just what he does with the ball in his hands. Again, I don't think he's necessarily the most sudden or sharp in terms of his route running and his stem work. But man, you just give him the ball on like a little smoke screen and watch him run through dudes. Like he's got speed, but he's also truck sticking guys left and right. He truly is a running back once he gets the ball in his hands. He's so fun to watch. Corley's an interesting one just because of his size. He's like 5'10", 207, but I think he fits more of the fun receiver mold than he does the X receiver mold. Troy Franklin is one who I'm down on. I wouldn't hate the idea of Troy Franklin if they got him, even if they took him at 60, although I do have more of a 3rd round grade than I do have a 2 on Troy Franklin. I'm not extremely high on him. I also don't, I know this is probably going to get me in trouble. I don't hate Devontae Walker just because of what his speed can be depending on where they got him. Again, I'm just trying to pair different skill sets with sizes and frames and prototypes. Oh, that's a cool one from Matt saying Leggett and Anthony Gould. Charles, to your question, what about Jalen Coker? I have not watched him yet. He's in my last group of, I have a bunch of random running backs, defensive tackles, and some receivers to hit before the draft gets here on Thursday. I'm going to be putting out a bunch of stuff on Twitter in the coming days. But yeah, I have to get to Jalen Coker from Holy Cross. He's one that I kind of have to knock off my board. I also want to watch a little bit of Bub Means just because I've heard some people talk, but I haven't really watched him a ton. Nikki's saying Worthy and Pearsall. Man, Xavier Worthy and Ricky Pearsall would be sick. Oh, I like Daniel's one. The two Xaviers, Xavier Worthy and Xavier Leggett. That would be really cool. There's a lot of fun. I think this also too, like just seeing everybody's answers in the chat and even some of the ones I've thrown out. I think that's part of the reason why I'm not stressing about wide receivers so much, even though it is a big need for this team, especially now that Stephon Diggs is gone. There's so many fun combinations and possibilities at wide receiver. And I really think we need to see the full gamut in terms of the draft picks before we judge it. Like if the Bills took Ladd McConkey at 28, I will feel better knowing they paired him with a potential true X later. So if they got Ladd McConkey and then Javon Baker or Brendan Rice, to kind of put that into perspective. Like, so say they get Ladd McConkey and then they get Brendan Rice early on day 3 or late in day 2 somehow, that makes me feel a lot better, right? But it'd be the same even if they get that true X, I still want the fun receiver to go with it. But I will feel better with the fun receiver knowing they have the potential X because I value the potential X more than I do that fun receiver. But again, it's a lot of mix and match. Like you can really go down, I don't know, like the first 20, 23 receivers and have, I shouldn't say that because excluding the big 3 and pull out a lot of really fun combinations. I'm just going through like my list right now and just even Johnny Wilson is kind of intriguing from Florida State, who I've looked at him more recently and watched some tape for some other guys. Oh, another comment here from Josh saying, I know you're low on Franklin, but if we do take him, who would you like to see him taken with? So Franklin, I put in the fun category, right? His speed is super real, super legit. And I know we ran a 4.41, which was disappointing at the combine considering what he runs on tape. But then it came out that he was like sick and wasn't feeling good. And that's why he ran so poorly and why he looked so poorly, yada, yada. But I put Franklin in the fun category, right? I think the speed, the juice, the electricity, the ability to stack corners, that plays. He's either going to win vertically or he's going to pull coverage. And that's awesome. I think you pair Troy Franklin with more of the true X. So then for me, it's Troy Franklin and Keon Coleman, or Javon Baker, Troy Franklin, and Brendan Rice. Like I put him in that fun wide receiver bucket. And so then you have to put the fun guys with that type of true X. But again, some of the fun guys can do some X things. Like I do trust Ladd McConkey to kind of win anywhere, although I don't want him winning 50-50 balls and going downfield. Like I do trust Ricky Pearsall in a lot of ways just because of how good he is as a route runner and everything he does with how technical and fluid that he is. Good comment there from Charles saying Franklin feels like a KC pick. Yeah, I could see Troy Franklin going to Kansas City and just absolutely balling out. I don't know what they're going to do at receiver though now after getting Hollywood Brown and just he fills that speed element. So I don't know if, sorry, I had to cough there. I don't know if they necessarily go there, but that'd be wild just to get the speed of Rashee Rice, who I still don't love, but the speed of Rice, the speed of Hollywood Brown, like the speed of Troy Franklin, and then you're still rocking with, granted, he's a little older, like Travis Kelce and their tight end sets, and then being able to run the ball in that O-line, man, that would be nuts. Good comment here from Adam saying trade back to get a third rounder, draft O-line or D-line with your early second, Pearsall with pick 60, and Javon Baker in the third. I'm going to keep banging the drum for the move of trading out of 28 into the 30s and hoping you get a third rounder back with it. That's really, 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 really what I want to see. But man, if they could get this option, if they could make some sort of trade and they end up getting Ricky Pearsall at 60 and Javon Baker in the third round, man, that would be really awesome. I have a 2-3 on Javon Baker, which is why I'm fine taking him at pick 60 because, it's basically the end of the second round. Or it's almost the start of the third round. It's the end of the second. Similar to how you take guys at the end of round 1 that have a 2 grade, you can take guys who have a 3 grade at the end of round 2 and vice versa and so on and so forth. yeah, there's a lot of fun options for the Bills, and Franzo Futetini. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it. It says the talk show is here in KC are super high and worthy. Oh, Franzo, you had an awesome comment earlier, and I pulled it up and I meant to star it because I think everybody should see it. It was on the make and model. It was the make and model comment that you had. Oh, I'm scrolling back. Nobody hate me. Everybody just talk amongst yourselves while I try and find this comment. Oh, I wish there it is. This was an awesome comment. The wide receiver argument is like the truck argument. Chevy versus Ford versus Toyota. Each is different in its own right, but no one is going to move off their make. I love that for this wide receiver conversation here. And even again, I'm a little guilty of it myself. Like I gravitate towards speed and route running. But I do love dudes who can win 80, like 50 balls and make them 80-20. I do like guys that can separate at the catch point, which is why even though he's clunky and not a good route runner, I do like Keon Coleman because of what he can do at the catch point. And I do think he's more athletic than he gets credit for. But this is absolutely specific. Like I can't tell you how many conversations I've heard with like the adults in my family from the time I was little of so-and-so who only, drives Chevy and so who will only drive Ford F-150s, and then the Dodge versus Ford truck conversation and the Chevy Silverados. And that's exactly it. Like each is different in their own right. No one's going to move off their make. The Chevy dudes are Chevy ride or die, no pun intended. Ford dudes are the same way. Toyota dudes, Dodge dudes. And I think it's similar for that wide receiver conversation this year. Like what you like as a skill set or a mold tends to kind of come out in your rankings. And I've tried to fight super hard against that bias. But for me, I just value speed and route running because I think that's the biggest indicator of success at the next level in the NFL. If you're fast, that's awesome and that helps. But being a good route runner, you can consistently find ways to win regardless of your size. If you know how to get off the line with a good release, if you know how to stem your routes, pace your routes, accelerate and decelerate, all of that in that route running conversation, I just think it translates really well to that next level. Charles saying, what do you value in your wide receiver? So for wide receivers, I just said speed and route running. Although I do value ball winners as well. Like the guys like T. Higgins, who, again, like he says, turn 50-50 balls into 80-20 balls. Edges, I value pass rush plan and defending the run. So being able to put moves together. You don't necessarily have to have the most moves coming out of college, because I think you can build upon that in the NFL, but I want to start to see some semblance of planning, even though you can learn this a bit at the NFL level as well. But I value planning, understanding that you've been working this guy around the arc and the outside in the first half. So now you've got him thinking that, and now you can set up the inside move, right? Or you've been working hard on that rip and winning that half man through the outside, and now you're going to package it with a spin or try and counter and come back inside. Or you've been winning inside, so now you're going to try and use a cross chop and somehow change it up. So pass rush plan, and then juice. So athleticism. I don't mind pocket compression type dudes, but I like more of the bendy, athletic, turn the corner type of guys who have just electricity and juice coming off the edge, and then dudes who defend the run. So like even like Darius Robinson isn't a juice guy. Like he's a pocket compression guy if you're looking at him for edge. The dude from Missouri, some people view him as an interior defensive lineman. Some people view him all over the D line. I view him as an edge. He's not twitched up. He's not juiced up, but he defends the run so beautifully, and he uses his length and his strength and that ability to defend the run, similar to like cornerbacks for me. Like I love Terrion Arnold. I think he's got good feet and he reads route distributions well and has good route anticipation. But the way he defends the run, like you find me a corner who defends the run, especially in today's NFL with two high safety looks, you need a corner who's going to be able to come and function in the run fit. So I love like Terrion Arnold because of that. But yeah, so edges, it's pass rush plan, like juice and athleticism, and then the ability to defend the run. What else? So corners, it's feet, hand usage, kind of break it in 3 feet, hand usage, and then defending the run. Obviously, like eyes and route reading and all of that. That's gonna be a whole episode in and of itself, kind of breaking everything down. Josh with another one saying, a question I had last week was, if we stay at 28, would you trade back perhaps 28 and a second next year, maybe add a fourth and a fifth this year to go get Washington's 36 and 40, give or take? Ooh, that's a lot of mixing and matching. But if I will say this, right? The more day 2 picks that the Bills can acquire in this draft, I am a fan of. I don't necessarily know if I want to package next year's 2 with it, or in some kind of combination like that, but I am a fan of whatever gets the Bills more day 2 picks, whether that means trading back from 28, if that means trading back from 60 or back and then up, or packaging, a third next year or a fourth next year with a fourth this year and maybe even a player. I don't think that's going to happen, but moving up and getting that third, like whatever gets me more day 2 picks in this draft, I am a fan of. That is where I think the most value is. And I know there are some really heavy hitters in terms of round 1 graded guys, but if one of those true round 1 graded guys aren't there at 28, you've got this crop of second round graded dudes at 28. I really want to find a way to trade back into the mid 30s. And then I'll just be satisfied right there. If you can trade back out of 28 and get like, I know Washington has like 36, like 40, 78, and 90 something or 80 something. Like if you can give me that, or if Baltimore wants to move up from 30 to 28 and they'll give you 93 along with it, like just some combination that gets me into the mid 30s, but also gets me a third round pick this year. I love that above all, but just overall this year, whatever gets me more day 2 picks. So round 2 and round 3 this year, I am a fan of. And I like this comment here from Nikki saying, all these wide receiver combos is why we're all so excited for Thursday's draft. There's too many possible outcomes. Yeah, and that's why, like, to bring it back to what I said in the beginning, there would have to be something super sideways for me to hate what the Bills do in round 1 or in this draft in general. There would have to be something, and I don't even like, they would have to go running back in round 1 for me to be like pissed. I just think they could take Johnny Newton and I'd be cool. They could go interior defensive line. They could go interior offensive line. They could go receiver. They could go edge. They could go corner. They could trade back. They could trade up a little bit. They could trade up big time. Like, it would take a lot for me to be pissed off, which now I feel like I'm jinxing the hell out of what they're going to do in the first round, and I'm going to be super pissed. I see a lot of possible outcomes, and a lot of them are all fun. You just got to mix and match. Although I do think, like, this is a draft where you have to wait until the draft is done to feel better or best about the whole draft. Because I could see a pick happening in round 1 that people are like, why would you do that? And then you see the way the rest of the board falls and how things come together, and all of a sudden it looks a little better. Rowdy saying, I'm happy as long as we steal Javon Baker. I've been banging that drum since before the Senior Bowl. I'm not coming off of that. Cam Morey says, QB would piss you off too. Absolutely. I would not be a fan of that. Although I don't know if that means like the Bills traded Josh Allen and somehow ended up with like one, like they traded Josh Allen to the Bears and then they took Caleb Williams. Like, I don't know. I could get excited for that a little bit. Part of the chaos intrigues me. I'm like, chaos is a ladder, Game of Thrones, all that kind of stuff. Miller for Defensive Player of the Year 2024 says Quez Walker at the end of the second, and he says, book it. Oh man, that would be interesting. Oh, where's this comment from Dennis? I wanted to grab this. Dennis saying, I worry about the predictability of our top draft need this year. It's the same situation that yielded KC getting McDuffie and the Bills getting Elam. That's an old wound, but it feels fresh. Yeah, I love Trent McDuffie. I loved him, and I wanted him so bad. And they got jumped by KC, and now he's turned into an all-pro. Granted, it's in the slot, but I think his inside-outside versatility is underestimated. Just everything that he does, like dog in coverage, dog versus the run. Oh, I loved him, and the Bills ended up getting Elam. But I'm not out on Elam yet, although I wasn't high on him getting picked. I had similar Boogie Basham type vibes when he was picked. But I also, even within this, Dennis, I don't think our top draft need is too predictable. Like, I know receiver is probably the biggest perceived need. I don't think it's guaranteed that the Bills go receiver, but also even if they do, there's going to be a lot of options there. Like, I thought there was a significant drop off after Trent McDuffie in that draft class, right? And my next corner after McDuffie was Roger McCreary. It wasn't even Kyrie Elam. Kyrie Elam was in like the second tier. Like, I had a 2-3 on him because I just wasn't a huge fan. But I don't think there's that huge drop off at receiver. So if somebody jumps the Bills, and so I think Brian Thomas is going to go in the top 20. I've thought that the entire draft, the combine solidified it. So you take the big 3 out, you take Brian Thomas out. If somebody jumps the Bills for A.D. Mitchell, I'll be disappointed, but also not, because there's still more receivers. Like, there could be 6 or 7 receivers that go in the first 27 picks, and there's still going to be a good receiver available for the Bills at 28. But also, If teams jump the Bills to take receivers, that means a really good player at either interior offensive line or interior defensive line or edge or corner or some other position is going to fall. If all these receivers go, that means a blue chip prospect is going to fall from another position. And I'm not horribly down on that because you can still come back and get a receiver in round 2, right? You could take Javon Baker at 60 if you like Javon Baker and then pair him with Malik Washington in round 4 or Taj Washington or some kind of combination like that. Like there's so many fun possibilities that even though there is that top need at receiver, particularly X, but in receiver in general, I don't think it's to the point where if somebody jumps them for a receiver, they're dead in the water and your hands are tied like the Kyrie Elam year. Oh, Pops is the best place to find a draft guide. If you're signing up for The Athletic, which is super cheap now, you do that and you download The Beast from Dane Brugler. He's their NFL draft expert. He's probably the best in the business. So his draft guide is absolutely awesome. Russell Brown, who used to work for Cover One, who did all the draft stuff for Cover One, he now does stuff for Fantasy Pros. So go check out Russ's work. His draft guide is up on Fantasy Pros. You can search him on Twitter. Pops, his handle is at Russ NFL Draft, and you can find his draft guide. His is awesome. Nate Tice has one up on Yahoo Sports. That's great. So I'd check out one of those. They do a lot of great work. Bills are electric, saying we can't hide that we need a wide receiver. Nothing we can do about it. No, the Bills need multiple wide receivers. But again, I still think within that, they can still address other positions of need that can mitigate kind of how disappointed they are that they maybe didn't get the receiver that they coveted. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Walter says if we had McDuffie, we'd still be looking for outside CB, but now we'd have 2 slot CBs. I think McDuffie moved into the slot because of what they had on the outside and because they needed him to go into the slot. And granted, I know he's a shorter arm guy and a smaller dude and he fits there. He plays a decent amount of outside corner for this team, especially when they're in 2 corner looks. He was on the outside and L'Jarius Sneed was on the outside. Again, I know he's known as, that's why I prefaced it with like him being like a slot corner and kind of taking that role, but he's somebody who I believed could be an outside corner and he still functions from time to time in those roles for Kansas City based on the looks that they have. Yeah, so even Trent McDuffie last year, he had 608 snaps in the slot, 368 at outside corner. The previous year, he had 247 in the slot, 536 at outside corner. So his career snaps, slot 855, outside corner 904. He truly is an inside-outside piece. He just functioned in the slot because that's what they needed more, and he excelled there. But he can play outside. Rowdy says, what do you think about Cooper DeJean at 28? I don't hate it. I don't love it. I like Cooper DeJean, but I also don't love Cooper DeJean. I think he is kind of that jack of all trades guy. The stiffness in his hips or the tightness in his hips and the average reaction speed worries me a little bit. I talked about it when I had Dane Brugler on the show last week for the special edition of Disguise Coverage. I like him, but I also don't. I also don't love him as a tackler. I don't think he's aggressive enough or consistent enough as a tackler, which is why I don't want to move him to safety. I don't really know what to do with him. He can kind of do everything, but also kind of maybe not. So he's an enigma to me a little bit. I wouldn't hate it because I trust McDermott to coach him up, given his skill set and how varied it is and all the traits that he has. I wouldn't hate it, but I don't love it. Oh, Black Panther saying A.D. Mitchell and Jalen Polk or Javon Baker pairing. That's a very fun one. What? Yeah, Johnny Max. And I wonder if every franchise is like this. We hate everyone we have. Every franchise is like this. Go back to like Kansas City Chiefs Twitter or Chiefs Reddit in the middle of the 2023 season. They wanted to burn the entire team to the ground. Or go back to before Andy Reid won his first Super Bowl with Mahomes. Chiefs fans wanted Andy Reid's head on a pike. Conversation for another time, though. All right, I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because we are going to get out of here. If you have not already, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video. We've had a lot of people engage in over 200 live viewers for the heavy majority of this episode. Whether you're watching live now or listening later, please, and thank you. If you have not already, drop a like on this YouTube video. Likes are the lifeblood of these live streams for myself, for the entire brand. This is a very busy time of year. All the likes, it sounds small. You have no idea how much those likes help propel these videos and the brand to jump up to the front page. So So please drop a like on this video if you have not already, whether you're watching live now or listening later. Also, sponsored by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, great cheese to sauce ratio, homemade blue cheese. They also do catering. They also do a breakfast pizza. Everything they do is legitimately delicious. I don't say they're the best because I partnered with them. I partnered with them because I legitimately think they are the best. And they're really good people. I mention every week all the initiatives and drives that they do for the city and community here in Buffalo. They truly are tremendous people making an absolutely tremendous tasting product. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza for draft night. Major thank you to Mr. Bruce Nolan for joining me here on this episode. He was awesome, crushed it as always. You folks know Bruce. I love him every time I have him on the show. I know you folks do as well. Hopefully we'll have some more collaborations coming forward. So major thank you to Bruce. If you watch live, thank you very much for joining myself and Bruce live for this episode of Disguise Coverage. Thank you very much to everybody in the live chat, all the engagement, the back and forth with each other, the back and forth with myself and Bruce, their great questions, thoughts, the comments. Thank you very much to Justin for your super chat. Again, like you did last week, thank you very much for being here and for the monetary donation. Thank you very much to Josh for the kind words and your awesome question. John at Discounted Foods for yours as well. And really everybody in the live chat. The live chat was awesome tonight. I can feel the excitement and anticipation for this draft kind of through the energy and everybody coming through. So I really appreciate you folks who rode with me live here on this episode. If you did not ride live, that's cool. Thank you very much for your post live view, download, and or listen. If you're here on YouTube, turn on notifications for Disguise Coverage and subscribe to the Cover One channel as a whole. If you're on the audio platforms, please rate and review and subscribe. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this show is. If you hate this show and you think it's terrible, tell your enemies and try and make them watch this show to ruin their night and or ruin their day. No film room tomorrow because Eric is on vacation. I will be doing some film stuff on whoever the Bills pick for round one, day 2 and day 3, potentially earlier than just the regular film room episode, which will be dropping next week. We'll be back next Wednesday for the film room as well Disguise Coverage. We'll see how this weekend goes. Eric might be back in time. We might be able to do some stuff together. I might do some stuff solo. Myself and Greg Thompson will be doing Bills review stuff after every single day of the draft. So Thursday night at about midnight, we'll be doing a review of that. Friday night at probably midnight again, we'll be doing day 2, and then we'll do one Saturday after day 3 for all of those people. Yeah. And I don't think I have anything else. I think that was it. I appreciate you folks. I also appreciate all the there's a lot of good comments coming in. I say this all the time. I don't like to pull up positive comments. So I think it's cheesy, but I think it's cheesy because I think it's like, I don't know, it's weird to like, especially because like there's no producer here for me. So it's not like somebody clicking on like the positive comments and the kind words. It's just me clicking. Like if someone's like, hey, Ant, you're awesome. Like I'm clicking on that. And I feel like that's weird, but I do see all the positive comments. And they mean a lot to me, sincerely. I'm very thankful to have this platform, and I'm sincerely very grateful and blessed to have it. And it's awesome just to have this many people tune in live or watch in general, and then the positive feedback that you folks have for me and putting your trust in me with the show and my analysis and people who follow me on Twitter, all that kind of stuff. I appreciate you folks more than you. Nice one, Spin. I appreciate you. I appreciate you folks more than you will possibly know. Nikki saying, are you going to Detroit? No, I'm not going to Detroit. Schedule and stuff just didn't align for me with day job things and life in general. I'm also not, I like being at home. I'm a homebody for games in general, but especially the draft. I like to sit in my element and be able to have everything in front of me and live tweet it and cover it and do all that kind of stuff. I think it allows me to provide better content. So I'm not a huge live draft person. I may consider it one day, but we'll see. All right. That'll do it for us here. Again, no film room tomorrow. Check out, we have live draft coverage every single night, Thursday night, Friday night, all day Saturday. And then myself and Greg Thompson will be doing reviews immediately. Round 2 and 3 are over, and immediately after day 3 is over. So Thursday night, live draft coverage, and a post draft recap. Friday night, live draft coverage and a post-draft recap. Saturday, live draft coverage and a post-draft recap. And then I'm going to be putting out film stuff, probably 10 to 15-minute videos on Friday and Saturday of the round 1, 2, and 3 picks. Potentially, we'll see what happens. So a lot of content coming from myself and the entire team and the entire brand. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. Sincerely, I appreciate you folks more than you will possibly know. Thank you so much for all the kind words and the positive comments. They mean a lot to me. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Again, thank you to everyone who tuned into this episode live. Thank you to everyone who watched it after. Thank you very much to Bruce Nolan. Godspeed. We'll see what happens Thursday. And as always, go Bills.